So why are you drilling there if there's so much that is not known about this territory?
Well, we're drilling because it's a very important source of energy for the United States and the world. That is the reality. Almost 30% of the United States oil production today comes from the deep waters. That is where there is the opportunity to provide domestic energy security. That is where there is an opportunity to provide energy security for the world. And of course, oil isn't all of the solution, but it's a part of the solution.
That opportunity obviously comes, though, with great peril. Is deep water drilling riskier than BP believed?
I think you have to go back to, the track record of the industry and BP's over the last 20 years. The industry's drilled over 5,000 wells. BP's drilled around 1,500 of those 5,000 wells. And this is the first time that we've had a major incident. And I think it is legitimate to draw analogies with, for example, the space program. The space program was not cancelled because of the issues around Apollo 13. It's also legitimate to draw comparisons with the airline industry. When the Air France plane fell out of the sky coming out of Brazil, we didn't ground the airline industry. So we need to learn the lessons here. They will be learnt, and they will shape, I'm certain, the industry as it moves forward.
Is it legitimate also to draw parallels to the Exxon Valdez spill, where it was determined that human error was also a factor?
Well, I think we have to await the results of the investigations. My focus today, quite frankly, is on the response.
When I listen to you talk about your record, you note that you've been doing this kind of deep water drilling for 2 decades, and you've only had one major spill like this. Many people would say that's hardly anything to crow about, though.
Well, I'm not crowing about it. I'm just saying it's a statement of fact. This is clearly a very serious incident which we are taking incredibly seriously. We are responding in a very, very aggressive way. We are working with all of the federal agencies to control it and eliminate the leak. So there's no crowing here. It's just a statement of fact. This is the first time in 25 years we've had to contend with this issue.
Now, you say that right now you're working with the federal agencies and the state agencies. BP is facing, as you know, more than 100 civil lawsuits, and now an angry BP investor has sued the company, saying that BP has put profits ahead of safety. And one of the main claims in that suit is that the company lobbied state and federal agencies to remove or decrease the extent of safety and maintenance regulations in favor of voluntary compliance. So while you say you're working with federal and state agencies now, this lawsuit claims that you were working against them, fighting hard against the government in terms of rolling back oversight.
I don't believe there's any evidence of that. The dialogue that we were having with the government at that time was not about trying to push off regulation. It was to ensure that the regulation was the right regulation, applied in the right way to eliminate risk, and not to lead us to believe we'd eliminated risk where in fact we hadn't.
Are you in favor? Are you still in favor of voluntary compliance in the face of
I'm in
spill?
favor of the right regulation to ensure that risk is absolutely managed and minimized to the greatest extent possible.
Is it possible that we might be looking at weeks or perhaps even months before this well is capped?
It's certainly possible. It's not what we're planning on. It's not what we're wanting to have as the outcome. But we have to recognize that as a possibility and be prepared to deal with it if that should be the case.
Mr. Hayward, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity.
Tony Hayward is the Chief Executive Officer of the oil company BP.
After the survivors were rescued from the burning oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, they stayed on the water for over 24 hours. One reason, there was a battle going on for information. The Coast Guard wanted to know what caused the explosion. The company that owned the rig wanted answers too. Meanwhile, the men were desperate to call their worried families. From NPR's investigative unit, correspondent Joseph Shapiro explains.
The men who survived the burning Deepwater Horizon oil rig were picked up by the crew of a nearby supply boat, the Damon Bankston. Soon the Coast Guard arrived. One thing the officers wanted was a witness statement from the survivors.
They came on there and they gathered everybody in the galley on the boat and handed out a piece, papers and stuff saying, this is for statements. You need to sign these. Nobody's getting off here until we get one from everybody.
That's Christopher Choi, a young roustabout on the oil rig. Choi took the witness form.
And then at the bottom it says something about, like, this can be used as evidence in court and all that. I told him I'm not signing it. Most of the people signed it and filled them out and stuff. I just didn't feel comfortable doing it.
The Coast Guard acknowledges it kept the men on the water in part to get statements. But Choi says he thought the man who gave him the form said he was a lawyer with BP, the oil company. BP says it had no lawyers there. Choi didn't sign the Coast Guard form, but he'd come to regret that he didn't refuse the next time he was asked to sign something. He was desperate to see his wife. Chris, who's 23, and Monica, who's 19, were married last October. Monica first learned about the explosion from a phone call from an eyewitness. It was Chris's stepfather, who worked on another rig 30 miles away from the Deepwater Horizon.
He said that the first thing he asked is, please don't tell me that's the Horizon. And he said, because that's my son. My son's on that Horizon. And, they told him that it was, and he just came in a panic.
Monica would spend the next 12 hours waiting to hear if her husband was dead or alive. She called and called a number for Transocean, Chris's employer, and the owner of the rig. When someone finally called her back, they could only say her husband was on a list of the survivors. That wasn't good enough for Monica at home in Houston.
Never been on a plane before. I actually got a cab because I couldn't drive. I got a cab, and I've never been in one of those before. And then I flew for about 45 minutes. It scared me, but I didn't care at the time.
By the time she got to the hotel in Louisiana,